Hello everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. A warm welcome to you all this particular YouTube class. Today I am going to have the discussion on one of the important topics for HSTR syllabus, that is about clause and its types. Clause and its types. Clause. So first of all, you have to understand the definition of clause. What do you mean by clause actually? In Kannada, we can call it as ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. The meaning of the clause is ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ. So what actually a clause mean by? Clause ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದರ ಅರ್ಥ ಏನು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. And later we will come to know what are the types under the clauses. ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಂತಹ ಟೈಪ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಏನಾಗಿವೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. So clause is actually a part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. This is the definition of clause. Clause is a part of a sentence. Look at this definition. Clause is a part of a sentence. Part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. A finite verb with it. So what makes a clause actually? That is very important. Sometime a part of a sentence is there, but that cannot be considered as a clause. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ that is a part of a sentence, ಅದು part of a sentence ಆಗಿದೆ, but it is not considered as a clause. ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. And what makes a part of a sentence actually a clause is that is a finite verb. The presence of finite verb make a part of a sentence as a clause. It means there must be a finite verb with it. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಅನ್ನ ಪಡೆದಿರುವಂತಹ ವಾಕ್ಯದ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ವಾಕ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನೇಕ ಭಾಗಗಳಿವೆ, ಬಟ್ ವಾಕ್ಯದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಭಾಗಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿರೋಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. A clause is a part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. It means this finite verb is to be present there. Look at this example. Because of his misbehavior, he is expelled out from the class. Expelled out from the class. Because of his misbehavior, he is expelled out from the class. So this is a whole sentence. This is considered as a whole sentence. ಇದು ಇಡಿಯಾಗಿರುವ ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯ ಆಗಿದೆ. And here, because of his misbehavior, this is also part of a sentence. And this is also a part of a sentence. He is expelled out from the class. There are two parts of sentence. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎರಡು ಪಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಕೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಮಿಸ್ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್, ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್. ದಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಬಿ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್. ಅಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ಹಿ ಈಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಲ್ಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್. But this part is not considered as a clause, but this is considered as just a phrase ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Even though this is a part of a sentence, ಇದು ಒಂದು part of a sentence ಆಗಿದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ we cannot call it as a clause because there is no finite verb present in this particular part. Because of his misbehavior, ಈ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಫ್ರೇಸ್. ಫ್ರೇಸ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಅ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ಫುಲ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಆಫ್ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್. ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ಫುಲ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಆಫ್ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಏನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ? ಫ್ರೇಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಫ್ರೇಸ್. ಬಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್, he is expelled out from the class. He is expelled out from the class. This is considered as a clause. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಈಸ್. ಟು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ದ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಅರ್ಥೈಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್. Finite verb is a verb which has the tense and the number of its own. In general ಆಗಿ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ಸ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೆ, ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ಸ್ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ all the helping verbs are always finite verbs. All the helping verbs, they are all called as finite verbs. For example, am, be form of helping verbs, is, are, was, were, do, does, did, has, have, had. And at the same time, all the modal verbs will, would, shall, should, may, might, can, could, must, etc. So these are all called as the helping verbs. They include primary auxiliaries, both primary auxiliaries and the modal auxiliaries. Primary auxiliary kuda adrallive and modal auxiliaries kuda adrallive. So all the helping verbs are always considered as the finite verbs. So the presence of helping verbs, if there is a helping verb present in a sentence, then there must be a finite verb. That is to be considered as finite verb. And the next one, finite verbs nalli, verb number 1, V1 form of the verb. It means present form of the verb. It may be finite or non-finite. It may be finite or non-finite. It depends upon the situation. Verb number 1, it may be finite verb or it may be a non-finite verb. It depends upon the situation. ಅದು ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ? ಸಿಚುಯೇಷನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. And if it is having the preposition to plus V1 or helping verb plus V1, then this is mostly non-finite verb. Non-finite verb ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Particularly that is infinitive ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. This is a very short information about finite and non-finite verbs. And the rest of the plain V1, it is already finite verb. And all V2 form of verbs are always finite verbs. Always finite verbs. So this is to be remembered to be very short. In a nutshell, all the helping verbs, whether it is primary auxiliary or it is secondary auxiliaries, they are considered as finite verbs. ಅವು ಏನಾಗಿವೆ? Finite verbs ಆಗಿವೆ. And all the verb number 1, present form of the verb, they may be finite or it may be non-finite. It depends upon the situation. ಅದೇನಾಗಿದೆ? ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. If the verb number has the preposition to with it, then that is considered as non-finite verb, especially that is infinitive. And the verb number 1 having helping verb with it, then that is also non-finite verb, and that is also particularly infinitive ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. And then in all the other cases, the verb number 1 is always finite verb. And verb number two, it is always finite verb. Verb number two, second form of the verb, it means past form of the verb ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, that is always finite verb ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅದು always finite verb ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. That is to be remembered. So this is the concept of finite verb. And now come to the point clause. Clause is a part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. It means you must have a helping verb or a verb number one form or a verb number two form with it. And he is expelled out from the class. In this particular clause, we have one finite verb here, is, and that's why this is considered as a clause. It means this clause has a finite verb with it. A part of a sentence having a finite verb is called as clause. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ವಾಕ್ಯದ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗವಾಗಿದ್ದು ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅದು ಪಡೆದುಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರೆ that is called as finite verb. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವೇನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, clause ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. That is very very important. And under this clause we have two main clauses. One is types of clause. Types of clauses. We have two kinds of clauses mainly. One is main clause. One is main clause or an independent clause. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು independent clause ಅಂತಾನೂ ಕೂಡ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. You can call it as main clause or an independent clause. The other clause is subordinate clause. Subordinate clause. And or you can call it as dependent clause. So in this dependent clause or subordinate clause, we have again three important clauses. One is noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. Noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. Noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. So there are two main clauses. One is main clause or independent clause. We can call it as swatantra vakyanshagalu. This is in Kannada, we can call it as swatantra vakyansha. And the next one is subordinate clause or dependent clause. We can call it as avalambita vakyansha. Avalambita vakyansha. And in subordinate clause, we have three sub clauses again. That is noun clause, namapadada vakyansha, adjective clause, nama visheshanada vakyansha, and that is adverb clause, kriya visheshanada vakyansha. So before going to understand, before going to get the idea about noun clause, what is noun clause, what is adjective clause, and what is adverb clause, first of all you have to understand what is main clause and what is subordinate clause. Main clause means the clause which gives, main clause ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರ ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. Main clause means the clause which gives the complete meaning on its own. ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಂತ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ, ಸ್ವಯಂ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ ಕೊಡಬಲ್ಲಂತಹ ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ. The clause which gives the complete meaning on its own, that is called as a main clause or independent clause. ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ ಕೊಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. And the clause which cannot give the meaning on its own is called as dependent clause or the subordinate clause ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. The clause which gives the complete meaning on its own. on its own is called as the main clause. This is called as the main clause. ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಂತ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ ಕೊಡಬಲ್ಲಂತಹ ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, that is called as the main clause. But dependent clause means it is not able to give the complete meaning on its own. It means it depends on some other clause. ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು clause ಮೇಲೆ ಅದು ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. That is called as subordinate clause. Subordinate clause means the clause which cannot give. The clause which cannot give the complete meaning, the complete meaning on its own, on its own is called as the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause. It means this particular clause cannot give the complete meaning on its own. ಅದು ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರವಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ ಕೊಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. It depends on the some other clause. ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು clause ಮೇಲೆ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. And how can you understand whether the clause is main clause or dependent clause? Look at this example. As he suffered from the chest pain, as he suffered from the chest pain, he went to the hospital. Look at this. This is a whole sentence. ಇದು ಒಂದು ಇಡೀ ಆಗಿರುವಂತ ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯ ಆಗಿದೆ. This is considered as a whole sentence. As he suffered from the chest pain, he went to the hospital. The sentence has two parts with it. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎರಡು ಪಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ಗಳಿವೆ. The first part is as he suffered from the chest pain. This is the first part. And the next part is he went to the hospital. This is another part. So now a part of a sentence, as earlier told, what do you mean by clause? Clause is a part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. Now, as he suffered from the chest pain, this is a part of a sentence, and we have one finite verb here, that is verb number 2. V2 form of verb is always finite verb, as earlier told. Verb number 2 ಅನ್ನೋದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, that is always finite verb ಆಗಿದೆ. So this is a part of a sentence and it has the finite verb suffered with it, and that's why this is considered as a clause. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು clause ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. And this is also finite. This is also a clause because this is also a part of a sentence, and this particular part also has a finite verb went with it, that is verb number 2 form, and this is also clause. This is also clause and this is also clause, and there are two clauses in it, and these two clauses are connected with the coordinating SKN 77th batch student. Okay, thank you. Okay, these two clauses are connected with this particular conjunction, that is as ಎನ್ನುವ conjunction ಇಂದ ಅದು ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. Now look at this clause, as he suffered from the chest pain. So do you think that particular clause gives the complete meaning on its own? ಅವನು ಎದೆ ನೋವಿನಿಂದ ಬಳಲುತ್ತಿದ್ದ ಕಾರಣದಿಂದ. The meaning of this particular clause is ಅವನು ಎದೆ ನೋವಿನಿಂದ ಬಳಲುತ್ತಿದ್ದ ಕಾರಣದಿಂದ ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. Do you think the meaning is complete? And now look at this clause. He went to the hospital. The meaning of this clause is ಅವನು ಆಸ್ಪತ್ರೆಗೆ ಹೋದ. So the meaning of this particular clause, it means the second clause is complete. ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರ ಮೇಲೂ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. ದಿಸ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆನ್ ಸಮ್ ಅದರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್. That's why this clause is called as main clause. Main clause. And the other name for it is independent clause. This clause is called as independent clause ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥೈಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ. So now look at this clause. As he suffered from the chest pain, ಅವನು ಎದೆ ನೋವಿನಿಂದ ಬಳಲುತ್ತಿದ್ದ ಕಾರಣದಿಂದ ಅಂತ ಅದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ದ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಓನ್. ದಿಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆರ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ದಿಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಇಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ as he suffered from the chest pain, this particular clause depends on this particular clause to have the meaning on its own. ಅವನು ಎದೆ ನೋವಿನಿಂದ ಬಳಲುತ್ತಿದ್ದ ಕಾರಣದಿಂದ ಅವನು ಆಸ್ಪತ್ರೆಗೆ ಹೋದ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ದ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್. ಈಗ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ದಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್. ಅದು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ದಾಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ದ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ which gives the complete meaning on its own is called as, ಅದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, main clause ಆಗಿದೆ. The clause which cannot give the complete meaning on its own, that is called as subordinate clause. And look at one more example. If you work hard, if you work hard, you will pass the exam. You will pass the exam. If you work hard, you will pass the exam. If you work hard, this is a part of a sentence. This is a part of a sentence. And you will pass the exam. This is also part of a sentence. If you work hard, that is also part of a sentence. And you will pass the exam, that is also a part of a sentence. Because this is a part of a sentence and we can consider this as a clause because we have verb number 1 with it. It means there is a finite verb present in this particular part of a sentence. ಈ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಬಳಕೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್, ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವೇನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಇಫ್ ಯು ವರ್ಕ್ ಹಾರ್ಡ್, ನೀನು ಒಂದು ವೇಳೆ ಪರಿಶ್ರಮ ವಹಿಸಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸಿದರೆ ಅಂತ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹೇಳುತ್ತೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ಸ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಇಟ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಟೆಲ್. ಇಟ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಸಮ್ ಅದರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಟು ಗಿವ್ ದ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ಇಟ್. ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಮುಂದಿನ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಇದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, this concept is called as subordinate clause which doesn't give the complete meaning on its own. But now look at this part of a sentence, you will pass the exam. This is also a part of a sentence and this part of a sentence has finite verb this here will, that is helping verb ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಕೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಇದೆ, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಯು ವಿಲ್ ಪಾಸ್ ದ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್, ನೀನು ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆಯನ್ನ ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗುವೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ gives the complete meaning on its own. That's why this clause is called as main clause. So like this, main clause ಅನ್ನೋದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಏಬಲ್ ಆಗಿರುವಂತ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, that is main clause. If the clause is not able to give the complete meaning on its own, ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಂತ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನ ಕೊಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವಿಲ್ಲದ ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, that is dependent clause or subordinate clause. If you have the well idea about main clause and subordinate clause, and then we will have some other types. In subordinate clause, we have three important clauses. One is noun clause, the other is adjective clause, and the other is adverb clause. Noun clause andre ನಾಮಪದದ ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ. So what do you mean by noun clause? Noun clause. So this is actually a subordinate clause. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಸಬ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಂಡರ್ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಸಬ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ವಿಚ್ ಆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ನೌನ್. It is a clause which acts as a noun. A noun. It is a clause which acts as a noun. ಅದು ಒಂದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ನಾಮಪದವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಪದ, ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶ. ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೇನ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ that is actually a subordinate clause. Look at this. Subordinate clause nalli, under subordinate clause we have three types. One is noun clause, the second one is adjective clause, and the third one is adverb clause. All these three clauses are mainly subordinate clause, which means they do not give the meaning on their own. Meaning anna avu kodta illa. Yes. Compound sentence, complex sentence is the other topic. Types of sentence ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Just I am focusing on clauses. Compound sentence, for the sake of your information, compound sentence means two main clauses connected together with the coordinating conjunctions are called as compound sentence. You have asked a question, what do you mean by compound sentence? Compound sentence means there are two main clauses, ಎರಡು main clauses ಗಳಿವೆ, and they are connected with coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions, they always connect two clauses of the same rank. ಎರಡು clausesಗಳು ಒಂದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ಈ ವಾಕ್ಯಾಂಶಗಳು. ಇಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಟೂ ಇಂಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್. ಎರಡು ಇಂಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಗಳೇನಾಗಿವೆ, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಎರಡು ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗಳಿದ್ದು ಅವುಗಳು ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಇಂದ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಕಂಪೌಂಡ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಸ್. ದ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಇರೋದು, ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಇರೋದು, ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಟರ್ಮ್, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಟರ್ಮ್, ಫ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಾಯ್ಸ್. This is a very important clue to remember all the coordinating conjunctions. F for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for et, and S for so. So these are the 7 important coordinating conjunctions. ಇವೇನಾಗಿವೆ, coordinating conjunctions ಗಳಾಗಿವೆ. He is poor. Look at this. He is poor, but he is very honest. He is poor, but he is very honest. ಅವನು ಬಡವನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ. This is a part of a sentence, and this part of a sentence has finite verb with it, is, and this he is poor. ಅವನು ಬಡವನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ. This clause is main clause. ಇದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನು ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ, and that's why that is main clause. He is very honest. This is also a part of a sentence, and it has finite verb with it. ಅವನು ಪ್ರಾಮಾಣಿಕನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ. This clause also gives the complete meaning, and we have two main clauses here, and these two main clauses are connected with one coordinating conjunction, that is but coordinating conjunction. And like this, two main clauses connected with the coordinating conjunctions, that sentence is called as compound sentence. ಆ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಕಂಪೌಂಡ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ that will be discussed in detail while talking about the types of sentences: simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentence. Complex sentence ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, there are also two clauses present in a sentence, but one is dependent clause and the other is independent clause, and those two independent clauses, ಆ ಎರಡು independent clauses ಗಳು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇವೆ, they can be connected with one subordinating conjunction. ಅದು ಒಂದು subordinating conjunction ಇಂದ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ such type of clause is called as that is ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಸ್ ಹಿ ಸಫರ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಚೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪೇನ್, ಆಸ್ ಹಿ ಸಫರ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಚೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪೇನ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅಂಡ್ ಹಿ ವೆಂಟ್ ಟು ದ ಹಾಸ್ಪಿಟಲ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, ಒಂದು ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್, that is to be connected ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ that is ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. that is ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಅದಾಗಿದೆ. And now come to this point, it is a clause which acts as a noun. noun clause ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ನಾಮಪದವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸುವಂಥದ್ದು. The clause which acts as a noun is called as noun clause. I know that he is a famous doctor. So look at this. I know that he is a famous doctor. This particular sentence itself is a complex sentence. ಈಗ ಕಾಂಪೌಂಡ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಹೇಗಾಗಿದೆ, ಇದು ಕೂಡ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಐ ನೋ, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಐ ನೋ, ನನಗೆ ತಿಳಿದಿದೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಒನ್ ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ವಿತ್ ಇಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1. That he is a famous doctor, and this part is also having one finite verb. ಒಂದು finite verb ಇದೆ, that is helping verb. This is a clause. That he is a famous doctor, ಅವನು ಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ವೈದ್ಯನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಎಂಬುದು ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ಅ ಸೆನ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಓನ್, ಅದು ತನ್ನ ಬಲದ ಮೇಲೆ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. This clause is called as subordinate clause, and this clause acts as a noun because this gives the answer for what. I know ಅಂತ ಇದೆ. What do you know actually? ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. What do you know? ನಿನಗೇನು ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ? I know that he is a famous doctor. ನನ್ಗೇನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆತ ಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ವೈದ್ಯನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಎಂಬುದು ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ನನಗೆ ಅಂತ ಅದು ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ನಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಜನರಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಗಿವ್ಸ್ the answer for the question. The answer for the question what? The answer for the question what ಎನ್ನುವ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗೆ ಅದು ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. It may be a subject. It may be a subject, or it may be a complement, or it may be an object. ನನಗೇನು ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ that he is a famous doctor. ಅವತ್ತ ಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ವೈದ್ಯನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಎಂಬುದು ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಎನ್ನುವ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗೆ ಅದು ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. That's why this is called as a noun clause. This is called as a noun clause. ಇದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, noun clause ಆಗಿದೆ. Now look at the next clause is adjective clause ಅಂತ ಇದೆ. Adjective clause. Adjective clause means it acts as an adjective in a sentence. An adjective in the sentence. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ನಾಮವಿಶೇಷಣವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸುವಂತ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಇಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ adjective ಅಂದ್ರೆ adjective is a word which describes a noun. ಒಂದು ನಾಮಪದವನ್ನ ಅದು ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ನಾಮಪದವನ್ನ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. It means this particular clause has a noun with it, or a noun or pronoun with it. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಒಂದು ನಾಮಪದ ಅಥವಾ ಸರ್ವನಾಮಪದ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Now look at this example. He is the doctor. He is the doctor who performed the operation successfully. The operation successfully. So this is a complex sentence. Actually, this sentence is complex sentence because it has one main clause and the other subordinate clause. Now look at this clause. He is the doctor. This is a part of a sentence having a finite verb. One finite verb he is here, that is helping verb. He is the doctor. ಅವನು ವೈದ್ಯನಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತ indicate ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, and that gives a complete meaning on its own. That's why that is main clause. ಅದೊಂದು ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಹೂ ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಡ್ ದ ಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲಿ, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ನಂಬರ್ 2. ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ವರ್ಬ್ ನಂಬರ್ 2 ಫೈನೈಟ್ ವರ್ಬ್ ಇದೆ. ಹೂ ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಡ್ ದ ಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲಿ, ಎಸ್ ಶಸ್ತ್ರಚಿಕಿತ್ಸೆಯನ್ನ ಯಶಸ್ವಿಯಾಗಿ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ದಂತಹ ವೈದ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಇಟ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ದ ಸೆನ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಓನ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. This is called as subordinate clause. ಇದು ಒಂದು subordinate clause ಆಗಿದೆ. And this subordinate clause describe a noun that is doctor. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಶಸ್ತ್ರಚಿಕಿತ್ಸೆಯನ್ನ ಯಶಸ್ವಿಯಾಗಿ ಪೂರೈಕೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಂತಹ ವೈದ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಈ ವೈದ್ಯನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅದು ವಿವರಣೆಯನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. This particular clause explains this particular noun, and this noun is called as antecedent. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವೇನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ? ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಆಂಟಿಸಿಡೆಂಟ್. ಆಂಟಿಸಿಡೆಂಟ್, ವಾಟ್ ಡು ಯು ಮೀನ್ ಬೈ ಆಂಟಿಸಿಡೆಂಟ್? ಆಂಟಿಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ನೌನ್ ಆರ್ ಪ್ರೊನೌನ್. ಅದು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಆಂಟಿಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಅನ್ನೋದೇನಾಗಿದೆ? ಒಂದು ನಾಮಪದ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಸರ್ವನಾಮಪದ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಅಡ್ಜೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅದು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ? ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. And adverb clause, that acts as an adverb in a sentence. Adverb clause means it acts as an adverb in a sentence. An adverb in a sentence. ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು adverb ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸುತ್ತೆ. Having subordinating conjunctions with it. adverb ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ, ಹೇಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅದು ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. So earlier I have given you, if you work hard, you will pass the exam. If you work hard, you will pass the exam. So here, if you work hard, this is clause, and this is called as subordinate clause. Subordinate clause. And you will pass the exam. This is also clause, and it is main clause. This is a main clause. Idu main clause agide. And these two main clauses are connected with this particular conjunction, subordinating conjunction, that is if. That's why this is a complex sentence. And here, if you work hard, this subordinate clause act as an adverb. Idu enagutte? Adverb ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. That's why that is called as adverb clause. When will you pass? ಯಾವಾಗ ನೀನು ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗುವೆ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನ ವರ್ಣನೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನೀನು ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗ್ತಿ, ಯಾವಾಗ ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗುವೆ. ವೆನ್ ಯು, ಇಫ್ ಯು ವರ್ಕ್ ಹಾರ್ಡ್ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ನೀನು ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಪರಿಶ್ರಮ ವಹಿಸಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನೀನ್ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ದಾಟ್ ಗಿವ್ಸ್ ಅ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್. ಅದು ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಯಾವಾಗ ನೀನು ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆಯನ್ನ ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗ್ತಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ, ಪರಿಶ್ರಮ ವಹಿಸಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನೀನು ಉತ್ತೀರ್ಣನಾಗುವೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಅದು ಇಂಡಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್, ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಈಸ್ a part of a sentence in a nutshell. In as a brief ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋದಾದ್ರೆ, clause is a part of a sentence which has a finite verb with it. One thing you should remember, that to make a clause there must be a finite verb. Without the finite verb, we cannot consider that part of a sentence as a clause. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು clause ಅಂತ ಪರಿಗಣನೆ ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. That is to be considered as a phrase. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು phrase ಅಂತಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. And under the clause we have two kinds of clauses. One is main clause, the other is subordinate clause. And the subordinated clauses have further divided into three clauses, that is noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. And noun clause, they act as a noun in a sentence, and adjective clauses, they act as an adjective in a sentence, and adverb clause, they act as adverbs in the sentences. And along with this particular uh, chapter, compound sentence means two main clauses connected with coordinating conjunction, that is compound sentence. One dependent clause and the other independent clause, which is connected with subordinating conjunctions, that is complex sentence. ಒಂದು ಕಂಪೌಂಡ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ಎರಡು ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗಳಿದ್ದು ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಇರಬೇಕು. ಒಂದು ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಮೇನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇರಬೇಕು, ಉಳಿದದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಏನಾಗಿರಬೇಕು, ಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿರಬೇಕು. ಅವುಗಳು ಸಬಾರ್ಡಿನೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ ನಿಂದ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ದಟ್ ಟೈಪ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ as ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, I think you have got well idea about clauses and all of its types. Okay, thank you for being with me. Keep watching the videos, Chanakya Career Academy videos. Get benefited with such videos. Okay, ಇಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಲೈವ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡಿ ಅದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ಉಪಯೋಗಗಳನ್ನು ಪಡೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಒನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಲ್. ಸಿ ಯು ಇನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಬಾಯ್.